Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am hosting again this week. I am Zach Reed. And before I jump in, I have a couple of reads from sponsors. So first, this week's episode sponsored by Skyline Chili. We're family. We want to make customers happy. Skyline Chili. And also a second sponsor. This is a banner week for the Dummies. The J Mike Invitational Rookie Draft is sponsoring this week's episode. And if you haven't guessed it by now, by the open and by this week, I'm bringing on J Mike as, instead of a co-host, as the guest at J Mike Check from the Open Bar. He's a Dynasty Dummy. More importantly, he is a man I consider my brother. And this series of Edge Finders has been a lot of fun, very enlightening, and I expect it to continue. J Mike, thank you for coming on.
I'm just grateful to be here. Wow. And who knew that the J Mike Invitational would have the legs that it's had? It is the bit equity. It just keeps paying off. And I'm happy to be able to record with you in a really weird sort of way as the person that's not hosting and throwing alley-oops. So we'll see if I can make the finish.
It certainly is not my forte, being in this seat as opposed to kind of doing the analysis off the soft tosses, as you just put it in the strike zone. But we're going to give it a shot. And this Edge Finder series, like I said, it's been a lot of fun. I've been able to bring on a whole bunch of really sharp people and sit down and talk with some of my favorite analysts and pick their brains. Tonight, I think, is a little bit different because instead of bringing someone on from the outside, tonight is more like sitting down at the dining room table. We're having a family meal and we're asking each other how the day went. How did you operate last year in your leagues? And so I think that's going to be fun. But before I jump in, I've got a little bit of a tidbit on my mind, and it had a little bit to do with the No Name League that we're in. And Peter Howard took Rondell Moore at 201 and immediately taunted me. And so I sent him a first-round pick in 2022 for Rondell Moore. Boom. Stew on that, Peter. And he went to Twitter and started, and it got me thinking about analysis and all of this analysis that we all do. And I don't want to trivialize it because there are some really great people doing fantasy football and some really brilliant minds coming up with strategy. But the analysis doesn't matter. Make your own decisions because the best analysts are going to be wrong at this 40% of the time or better. And it reminded me of a quote from Victor Hugo from Les Miserables, which is, "The straight line is a respectable optical illusion, which ruins many a man." And to me, it looks easy. Peter Howard told you last year that Jalen Reagor was the guy to go get. A couple years ago when I was doing my film evaluation, John Kelly was the third best running back in this class. No doubt about it. He's going to come in and be great in the NFL. And ultimately, as good as, all of these people, JJ Zacharyson and Peter Howard and Russ Fisher and everybody, Matthew Berry, all the way on down. Liz Lowe's, I got to throw her in. She's my favorite. Oh, she's fantastic. But all the way down from Matthew Berry and Liz Loza, all the way down to lowly dummies like us, we're doing the best we can, but we're going to get it wrong. And your job as a fantasy football player, a fantasy football head coach, if you will, a fantasy football GM, is to make your own damn decision. Because at the end of the day, I don't have to live with your team. J Mike doesn't have to live with your team. Matthew Berry doesn't have to live with your team. We're all making analysis based on good faith. We're trying to do our best. We're trying to help you out. But ultimately, that's on you. You're making the decision. So make a decision that is going to be fun for you. Make a decision that you can live with, where you're not kicking yourself for listening to me, 2 months or 5 months or 2 years down the line.
Listen, that as someone who holds deep regret when it comes to certain decisions that we make and don't make, or that I make and I don't make, as they say, shoot your shot. Shoot the shot that you want to shoot, not the one that somebody else tells you to shoot. Because when you're laying awake at night and you're sitting there and you're wishing, man, if I would have just made this move, I would have been the 3 seed and I could have gone on. Or hey, if I would have made that move, you know what, my team would have totally crapped out. But at least I had the player I wanted. It's important to feel good about where you land, and not because somebody told you to get there. Because obviously, a lot of the fun is being able to make those decisions yourself.
Yeah, well, and that's really how I got into doing the analysis part, and especially the rookie film work. Because when I first got into Dynasty football, the rookies, I was relying on other people to tell me what they saw. And eventually I'm like, that's not how I want to make my decisions. I want to put eyes on these players, and I want to learn how to do that for myself. And so, you start to watch what the FF Ghost did, and you start to watch what Nick Whalen did, and you start to, now you've got, Ray Garvin at Ray GQ is fantastic, and he's open about his process, and you can see what he's seeing, and he'll tell you what he's seeing, whether you like it or not, he'll tell you. And the same thing with the Dynasty Nerds. They've got Jared Wackerly, and they do their film room, and there are a whole bunch of different places. If you're into analytics, there are a lot of people. Obviously, Peter Howard is a friend of the show and a friend of mine, and we talk him up. But somebody like Kent Wyrock or even JJ Zachariason, there are a lot of people who are very open about their processes, and don't just take their word for it. Understand it. Understand how to make your own decisions. And if you are not going to have the time to put in to do this, and it is a lot of time, I get it. Believe me, between December and April, I am watching some college player every night. There are no days off. There are no nights off. I know that I come in and sit down on the couch and start and my wife just kind of looks at me, and I'm like, yeah, I know. Again, I know. But after April, it'll get better. I promise. So I understand that the time commitment may not be there for you, but still make your own decisions. Still figure out who you trust. And I've also found that, at least for my money, the best people, and this is not just fantasy football, this goes beyond, but the best people are often the worst, because they have a knack for second guessing and making you reassess where you're standing. And I think that's really important to keep in mind as well.
What is the, here I go, snatching the host duties immediately as soon as I get the chance. Zach, take me through from a process standpoint. when you get to a place where you feel good about not even just your team, but when you start feeling good about your process, what are the things that you look for? What are the things that you feel like you lean on to sharpen yourself? Because it's one thing to find people that you trust, but I think it's another thing to continue to refine and take your process to new levels, even once you feel good about a process that you have.
So it's for me, it's looking at mistakes. It's looking at, when I miss on players, what did I miss on, and why? So, obviously the example I have been going back to, I'm stuck on John Kelly for whatever reason, but like a player like John Kelly, where my evaluation of him looked beautiful. I mean, he was so good to and through contact, and was a great pass catcher and did all of these things out of the backfield in Tennessee, and especially coming after Kamara, who had this amazing success. You're looking at, man, what did I miss on that? And so for Kelly, it was reassessing players who initiated contact, because I don't think you can do that in the NFL. So that just is like a little, like a real zoom in look at one thing. But that's how I start to evaluate my processes. I don't necessarily look at what I hit, because I should be hitting. Like that's the whole point of this, is you dial it in so you're hitting. But why did I miss? And then if you're missing on multiple players for the same reason, start to reassess. And I also do, and I talk about this when I do my rookie work, but I do a lot of checks and balances with the metrics community, because I do not do that portion of scouting. I do not have spreadsheets and crunch numbers, and I'm not looking at, CPOE and all of this stuff that Peter and Kent Wyrock and Dave Wright and even JJ Zacharyson and all of these people are doing tremendous work on that side of it. And I can gain edges by saying, this is my list. This is Peter Howard's list. Where are we similar and where are we different? And then where we're different, if he hit and I didn't, that's a place where I start to go back and reevaluate. And I'm always trying to pick people's brains who approach the game differently than I do, because the things I do well, I do. Like that's and I'll be the first to tell you, like, the best thing I do in fantasy football is evaluate rookies. If you look at my teams, when I rebuild because I identify a class of rookies that I think is going to be good, and I will attack 4 or 5 or 6 first round picks in that class, and I will go do that. So I did that with 2017. That we did a Dynasty Dummies show in 2016, talking about me doing that 2-year rebuild and attacking that process. Well, if I went back and did that show right now and recap, I won back-to-back championships and finished second last year. So that was a pretty nice rebuild. So that's how I succeed, is in this rookie class, in rookie classes, in rookie evaluations. But where I am lacking, and I'll also be the first to admit that I do have flaws, but I don't trade well. I don't analyze numbers. There are all of these things. My waiver wire and day-to-day activity, it probably puts me in the bottom end of a league. My in-season trading is just abysmal, and that's part of the reason why I've got you on tonight, because I've watched it happen where I thought I had the bull of the woods, and all of a sudden the dark horse makes 2 or 3 trades in season very tactically and passes me up, and I'm in a lot of trouble. And so that, I think, is to answer your question long-windedly, because that's how I do things. You put me out of the host chair, and all of a sudden here I am talking, and I don't want to be, but that is, I think, the way to get better, the way to dial in your process, is understanding your shortcomings and then trying to figure out why they're your shortcomings, and then making them, if not your strengths, at least passable, so you can get by on your strengths. And so that's where I attack things. So now that I'm back, I moved back over here to the host seat. And I mentioned that I saw you attack this sort of strategy in leagues that I'm in, but I think the real kind of kicker was TA6, the Trade Addicts League, where you took a Trade Addicts League and turned it on its head. You took the entire first round plus, and it became the J Mike Invitational. And you meticulously plan. I know you do. I've seen you do it. and execute that build or rebuild depending on where you're at. And I want to know, first off, where you begin to do that.
Obviously that's always the best place to start is at the beginning, right? So when I look at leagues, when I look at opportunity, when I look at what the landscape looks like, I recognize typically pretty well. When you talk about the things that you do well, I can do a pretty good job at the beginning of the year prognosticating when it comes to my construction of my team as to whereabouts I land. Am I someone who's pushing for a bye in the playoffs? Am I someone who's scraping to get into playoffs? Am I someone who's struggling to even have assets that make my team look nice to anybody else? I tend to do a lot of, and again, this is one of my faults. I tend to analyze and sometimes overanalyze what my starting point is. And even when we get into the midst of the season, one of my keys is deciding early if this team has what it takes to dance. And that's for me, if I'm able to, even if I'm wrong with my prognostication, understanding early on what I want to do and how I want to get there. And people will tell you, be water and got to be flexible and all these things. And that's nice and all, right? But in the same vein, understanding how those pivots will work if things fall apart is key. And I think one of the things that you and I had discussed, and I didn't bring it back this year, but we talked about it last year, is when we had the Dummy Blitz episodes and we talked about, we always paint this really rosy picture of our teams, of these players, and them becoming RB1s and leading our teams for 4 and 5 years in these championship windows. And it's beautiful. But what happens if the bottom falls out? What happens if they can't get the role to themselves? What happens if someone blows a tire, Cam Akers, or they have competition and they can't get on the field, J.K. Dobbins, or if the offense around them kind of looks like a mess, Jonathan? Like, what happens? Like, what now? What now? And a lot of my plotting just comes from being able to look at my team, understanding where I am now, depending on how a major step back and being okay with that.
I lost you for about the last 3 seconds, 10 seconds of that.
Oh man, that's a bummer.
After like Jonathan Taylor.
That stinks. Essentially, landing on the idea and understanding fully when it comes to making those decisions and understanding where my team is, I decide early. I want to be the first to market if I'm selling. I want to be the first to market if I'm trying to really dive in, and I want to be flexible in that sense.
I love that idea, because by being first, not only have you made a decision that is going to carry you for the rest of the season, but you've also set the market. So there's nobody yet, saying, "Oh, I could get more," or "Oh, he got more." Now you're setting that market, and I really like that. I think that oftentimes we get caught. Sometimes it's not necessarily about making the right choice. It's about making a choice and then making it right. So I think that because we don't know, making that choice is really important. So again, I've watched you do this both with picks and with players. So I assume that you're deciding based on how your team is looking. If you're bottom of the pile, you're looking picks. If you're a contender right away, you're looking players. How do you identify trade targets? Both the players themselves, but also teams in your leagues or other owners in your leagues that are now on your radar? You've got miss a lock and are looking to trade with.
The one of the really interesting parts of that, Zach, in terms of when I think about it and try to unpack it, I want to know if my team is fraudulent, and I want to be able to look and see if other people's teams are fraudulent, because the best trade partners are one of these two. They're people who fully understand where and what their team is and what's going on and how they got there, or the ones who are completely delusional about where their teams are and how they've performed at that point. If you have someone who's kind of hemming and hawing or in the middle of that, they don't necessarily make, at least that I've found, they don't make for the greatest of trade partners, because they're the ones who kind of have one toe in and one toe out. And they kind of want to, well, I want to see another couple of weeks to see what happens. Like in another couple of weeks, listen, it's too late. I've moved on, and I try to find someone else. So and typically what the beauty of that is, even if you can trade with, and when I talk about trade partners, even if I can find partners who are either at the bottom of the league or at the top of the league, in any one of those kind of quadrants, if you will, the top three or the bottom three, you can get a pretty clear understanding as to working the edges and understanding that if I am finding myself in this middle six, if I can work either one of those edges, and this is something that John Bosch has pushed upon me in a heavy way, being in the middle in Dynasty is awful. It is death to your teams. It is utter sadness, because on one hand, and I do understand the people who are like, hey, if I just get in the playoffs, anything can happen. Anything can happen if I just get in. And you know what? You're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. The problem with that is when you build a team that just wants to scrape its way in and there's no margin, and you're picking at 107 or you're picking at 108 during rookie season, all of a sudden that pick is not super tantalizing anymore, nor is that 6th, 7th place finish that you garnered just by sneaking into the playoffs. So if I can work either of those edges to push myself again toward the top or toward the bottom, where I can really come out and get the premium pieces in any direction, that's what I'm looking for. Oftentimes I am not on, and you talked about what kind of players do I target. Oftentimes these are players that either I'm very much fans of, or players that I know that will be marketable to other folks in my league. For example, one of the players that last season in the league that we're both in, Olympians, one of the players, when I decided that I wanted that team to bottom out because things were not looking good, one of the players that I went to acquire was a hurt Saquon Barkley. And understanding, okay, listen, if I'm going to get Saquon Barkley, this is the only way that I'm going to get Saquon Barkley at any sort of a value. And I was able to get a Saquon Barkley who was hurt and some other pieces for far less than what your Saquon Barkley would go for even now or even at the beginning of last season. So when I understand at that point that Saquon's the target because he's undervalued to some degree, and I know that other people are going to want him at some point, it makes for, again, having a team that is incredibly flexible, asset heavy, and understanding that Saquon is still a million dreams, right? Just like the song from The Greatest Showman, a million dreams of the world we're gonna make. Like the Saquon is the world we're gonna make. Like what happens when Saquon comes back from the ACL? He's everything, right? And so you can sell that to folks who are on the lookout.
It's funny, you and Russ both with your trade kind of acumen and the way you approach trades are not approaching, and this is something I don't do and I need to get better at, and there are probably people listening that are in the same boat I am, but you don't think of trades as like in this capsule, like they're not individual trades. It's making this trade to make the next trade to make the next trade. And I need to get better at that. That is something that I am very, very, very poor at.
But Zach, even in that, just to build for a second, one of the reasons, and it's funny that you bring up Russ as well when you talk about this. I think one of the reasons is, or let me try to say this a better way. One of the reasons that we can look at trades in a forest view versus the tree view is the fact that there have been so many trades that we've made that didn't work or that were bottomed out or that were just awful, and you took a bath on value or you took a bath on a player, and understanding after all those repetitions that it's okay to lose those trades and it's okay to fail or shoot your shot and miss. The question is now, after you do that, now what? And so you being someone, you pick and choose spots for trades, or oftentimes you will wait for someone to approach you with a trade, which is fine in itself, but the cascading effect of your trades is not something that you'll likely benefit from, nor will you suffer from it, because they're not things that you're stringing together. And if someone, you or anyone that might be listening, gets to the point where they understand that the trade of getting an asset doesn't end the building or the accumulation for my team, it is all a part of a puzzle that is consistently moving. So it is like an amoeba of assets or an asset amoeba. It is constantly moving, constantly transforming, and they fluctuate from day to day. Forget week to week. Like it's day to day, camp news to camp news blurred. But these things are constantly moving.
It almost reminds me of the Monty Hall problem. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but the Monty Hall, the game show host, Let's Make a Deal, where you had 3 doors and you had a car behind one door and goats behind the other 2, and you pick a door and he says, all right, this other door is a goat. Do you want to change? And the math says, yes, you do. But your mind says, nah, I could have had the car, even though with your first choice, you had a 1 in 3 chance at the car, and your second choice, now you have a 50-50 shot at the car. So it's a better chance if you trade. I think that's the mental hurdle with trading is everybody thinks they know more than they actually do about these players and what will happen in the future. And so you make a trade assuming you win. You make a trade assuming that what you thought would happen will happen. And most of the time we are really poor at predicting the future, especially when it comes to, 22 men on a field with an oblong ball, for 60 minutes, and you're trying to predict that. And it just, I think it's a mental hurdle oftentimes with trading. And it's the same thing you talk about. And this is something else. How much evaluation of other teams in your league do you do? Because you said that you evaluate your team, and that's one of your strengths, is figuring out where your team is and being pretty honest with yourself. Do you go after and evaluate the other teams in your league to do some of this identifying, like you talked about, people who may not quite understand the peril that their team is in to make a deal with?
No question. And roster construction is going to have a lot to do with that. In terms of when I look at other teams, and other people have said these words much better than I ever could, but the whole puzzle piece of, oh, look, I have something that could benefit your team that you don't currently have. And you have something that you don't really need right now that could benefit me for either now or later. The one of the really interesting parts about a league like Trade Addicts or leagues that have a lot of flex spots is that it is a beautiful amalgamation of build your own. And we love, specifically Americans, we love build your own. We love the autonomy. We love the freedom that comes with building your own home, or something as simple as building your own pizza at, some your local pizza spot, whatever the case is. We love build your own. And so when you have these leagues with a lot of flex spots, it opens the door for everyone to really lean in and embrace, oh, well, running backs are devalued in this league. What? Nobody wants to trade for running backs? Sweet, bring me the running backs. Or hey, you don't have anyone that's performing for you at wide receiver 3? Huh? I've got 4 wide receiver 3s. Like, let's and oftentimes for me, it is being 100% okay with not just losing a trade, but being so far under what most people would do that allows for the assets that you receive to be something that, again, allows you to do other things. So when you're trading for, or when you're making any trades and you're trading for the 29-year-old receiver, understanding that if you acquire him, there is a very limited market. It doesn't matter if that 29-year-old receiver is soon to be 29-year-old Devontae Adams. There is a limited market for Devontae Adams if you take him on. So if you move any number of players, understanding what you're getting back, that your market may be limited, and if you do feel the need to move that person, you're likely going to be moving them for less than. So for me, if I'm looking at another team, if I'm trying to identify either things that they need, things they don't have, or how our puzzle pieces fit together, a lot of it comes with a lot of discussion with that person to say, hey, what is the intention of your team? I send that message a lot to people in leagues. What is the intention of the team that you have? Are you contending right now? Do you feel good about it? And especially, again, going back to is this person delusional because they think that they're a top team in the league? Awesome. Well, I've got a deal for you, pal. And being okay with it, even if I'm getting the lesser of value, being totally okay with how I'm going about my process for the entire picture.
So I love that psychological play where you've already evaluated their team. Now let's see where they stand and see how close you are, and whether or not there's value to be mined there.
Because people get really upset, Zach, right? Yeah. People get really upset when you ask them this age-old question in Dynasty. We get really upset with, well, what do you want for Devontae Adams?
Yeah.
What do you want for Bryan Edwards? Okay, listen, I see you got 5 running backs on the team. What do you want? What do you want for Zeke? No, like nobody wants to be approached with that. It's like, just send me an offer, or let's have a discussion versus you just asking, blatantly, what do you want for such and such? Because if I tell you what I want and you get upset, this is your fault because you asked. I didn't ask you. You asked me. You called my number and asked me.
And I fall into that trap. Like I am not an active go out and I'm not a shark. I'm not the one who's always hunting, got to keep moving, finding trades to stay alive. Like that's not me. I am, and I said this to Russ last week, I'm that trout. I'll sit back down in that hole and wait for something to come by me, and I'll bite if I like it. But I miss out on a lot of these things that because I attack this game from a psychological point of view, I'm missing out on those interactions where I can glean more. And I love that for you. And I love that opening of, what do you see your team or where do you see your team at, or what direction are you headed with your team? I love that as an open, because not only are you making the other person think, but you're also gaining information. You're running a little recon without them even realizing you're doing it. Oh, I love it. I love it. Where was your team the night of June 5th, 1972? You got the interrogation going and they don't even know it's happening.
But it's good for me just to in I know you called it recon, which is hilarious to hear. It's like, well, I guess to some degree it kind of is. But in the same vein, it allows me to formulate trades that are more appetizing for them if I understand they're only looking for starting caliber players. Like sending someone Sterling Shepard and a second is not going to be exciting for someone who feels like they're a contender.
Right.
Like that doesn't really do anything for them whatsoever. So what does it look like for me to understand exactly what you like, and forget players or forget positions, because all of those things are things that either what people might put in their trade bait, or they may just have an inkling depending upon how they built their roster as to what their lean is. But if you get an understanding about their intention, right? What playing the game with the end in mind, where do you see yourself? If I can play this game with the end in mind, even if I have the dream of what someone else's end in mind is, whether we have the same end in mind, it allows me to be able to help align our teams together to figure out what works for the both of us.
Yes, and I love this. This is a between Russ last week and you this week. This is just a master class in trading and understanding how to, and I don't mean to say manipulate, because that sounds like a negative thing, but you're manipulating your league mates into, hey, we're pals. Hey, I am interested in, how your team is going, without giving the impression that I'm interested for my own benefit. And I really, I'm taking notes again. This is great. I have another question, because again, you in TA6 you had the entire first round. I mean, I'm sure that took 15 or 20 or 25 trades, and I'm sure that was a goal that you had in mind. The same as attacking Olympians, where all of a sudden you made the move to go get Kamara. You made moves to make your team better with the goal in mind. How do you keep it all straight?
I think Russ gave outstanding advice when he talked about being less competitive. There are certain edges that I recognize, similar, like you were talking about before, that I am not going to garner. There are certain edges when it comes to certain waiver rides that run every week at 5 a.m. It's not going to be me late every Tuesday night setting waivers and doing all those different things. So oftentimes it comes to when I have pockets of time looking at an individual league. And it may be a case where I only look at that league that day and charting the course, setting thorough expectations with myself. As the great Jalen Rose puts it, happiness is a function of expectations, not joy. I don't want to confuse people. Not joy, but happiness being a function of expectations. And if I can understand that in the course of a day, I want to be able to get a better feel for not only where my team is, but where my league mates' teams are, and probably more important than what I think they are, what they think they are. That will allow me in that one day to feel comfortable. And so, even though I may not take super detailed notes, unfortunately, I don't do the Leo, the Leo method there. Shout out to Siga for that. But I feel like I'm meticulous when it comes to, at least mentally, and this is, I guess, just the weirdo in me. Shout out to all my other psych grads out there. Just the weirdo in me that says, I want to know how I feel about my team. I want to know about other folks' team, and I want to know how they feel about their teams. And that just allows me pathways to move forward. So just for example's sake, when we look at something like Olympians, the league that we're in, it's a super flex league. For those that obviously aren't in the league and don't know, it is a 12-team league, and we've got to start. It's super flex. We're starting 2 running backs. We're starting 3 wide receivers. I think we've even got a flex spot, a tight end, right? And one of the things in that league last year I understood was I was not going anywhere with the running back core that I had, it was very sad. It was abysmal. And we're looking at the likes of early season David Montgomery, who was very disappointing, among others, right? And so when I go and I decide early on in the year, this team doesn't have the goods, let me move some of these pieces. And so I go and I look through all of the teams in the league, and I identify teams that either have a good record or maybe have pieces, or don't have high caliber pieces at certain positions. So when I'm shopping someone, a player like DeAndre Hopkins, I'm looking for pieces back, whether they are the magnitude of DeAndre Hopkins or pieces that make up the difference, quote unquote, to get to a DeAndre Hopkins type. It allows me to feel really comfortable about this team doesn't have it. I'm okay with moving this one piece, and I'm getting some other pieces that help me move forward with understanding I want to either bottom out or get way down and increase my drafting assets, or I want to get some pieces that, again, are flippable to other folks. Now, here's the kicker. After that trade, Zach, and if you remember, it was something to the effect of DeAndre Hopkins and Raheem Mostert, and I think maybe one other piece. I get back Saquon Barkley, who's hurt. I get back I believe a pick in the process, and maybe one other player like Michael Pittman. It was something of that nature. Now, strangely, as time goes on, I rip off like 4 or 5 straight wins on a team that I'm trying to lose with. I was like, okay, this is weird, but if I can find a way to get any kind of running backs to help me close this year, this could work out really well for me. And found a trade partner who was already out of it, had a plenty of injury, so it wasn't a chance of really them bouncing back. They kind of felt like their team was fraudulent. And so I ended up landing Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara for the likes of a hurt Saquon Barkley, which, again, if you're looking at Saquon Barkley, do you want him typically in most instances over both of those running backs? Yeah, Saquon's the higher valued asset per se, but he's hurt. And we don't know how he's coming back from the ACL. And then I also, in that move, I'm trading a CD Lamb, who, again, the value on Lamb was low because Dak's hurt. The offense looks like crap, and he's doing okay in his time with Ben DiNucci and Garrett Gilbert Grape and Andy Dalton and anyone else they wanted to try out there, and ended up moving a pick as well to go alongside that. So we get to the end of the year, I've got a team now that I feel really comfortable with, amongst some other trades that took place. But those were the 2 mega ones that said, hey, I'm trying to get the heck to the bottom. Help me. Like, I need to get there. Y'all help me get there. I make a trade and I'm trying to get there. And then when you reel off some random wins or some random points, understanding that, okay, I have a small window to make moves, and maybe I don't have as many trading partners because everyone's pretty well defined toward the end of the year with where they stand. What does it look like for me to be able to move what I want to? Do I want to trade Saquon Barkley? Do I want to trade CeeDee Lamb and a future first that I know is something that excites people? No, but if I get these hammers, I understand fully. It puts me in a position to really upset some folks when I get in the playoffs. So that was just one of those weird things where things really fell into place. The hammers did what they were supposed to, and I ended up taking home a title and upsetting your team, which is easily one of the best teams in the league. I'm sorry, I don't mean to reopen this wound.
No, it's okay.
That's just kind of the diagnosis, if you will, or the anatomy of a lot of what we've discussed this evening.
Well, and it's interesting to hear you talk kind of so casually about, yeah, I sent CD Lamb and I sent a first and I sent Saquon in this trade. And yes, you got back Kamara and you got back Derrick Henry and ultimately won a championship. And so it doesn't even matter. Like, even if you'd thrown 2 more firsts in, it wouldn't have mattered because you won. And winning a championship is not only what we play for because it's fun, but practically it is, now all of a sudden you've got your league paid for however many, years down the road and that sort of thing. But it's interesting to me to hear you just casually say, oh yeah, I traded CeeDee Lamb and I traded Saquon Barkley and I traded a first, because to me, I get stuck on my evaluations, and I have players that, like, I'm looking at my team in that league and thinking, man, I really could stand to have a running back because James Robinson is probably down a tier from what he was last year. And I went really heavy into the zero RB with that team. I was rolling Savon Ahmed in the playoffs, which worked out well, but it's not somebody that I'm confident in. But I'm looking at that team, and I've got Justin Jefferson, and I've got AJ Brown, and I've got Deontay Johnson, and these are all players that are, and I've got Darnell Mooney. These are all these are my guys, because that's how I build. Yeah. And so it's so hard for me to unwrap my mind from, these are my guys, and I'm ride or die with them. And I think that's something that a lot of people get caught up in, is you have players that you like and players that you, and especially if you're a Devy player, or if you're doing real deep dives into rookies, you get attached to these guys. Yeah. And it's difficult, but it's sometimes necessary. And I got to keep pounding that into my head. Sometimes necessary to trade somebody. It's the writing advice. When you edit, kill your darlings. That's sometimes you have to edit these beautiful paragraphs that you love to get down to the meat and potatoes of what you're actually trying to say. And I think the same thing is true for Dynasty, is sometimes these trades are going to be painful, and you don't necessarily lose, even though it is painful.
And that's and I love that you said that, because it's something that I feel like I won't say that nobody talks about. I don't want to get into that trope. But when we look at the things that are not discussed as frequently, like you just said, you just talked about this. There are evenings that you sacrificed with your family, with your spouse, with doing any number of things in the world that you could be doing, where you were there scouting and you were there putting in the work. And I've put in all of these man hours on saying that this person I'm comfortable saying is going to be amazing, i.e. Justin Jefferson. I am so comfortable that he is going to be awesome and he's going to be great. And you finally get to the point where all this work that was done in November and December and January and February and March, finally the draft comes and it's April, and your rookie drafts come and it's May and June. And by then you've put in about 6-7 months of work that really help you build a foundation for where you stand on a player. And you finally have the opportunity to get him on a team. And then you're going into said season, and then they start performing the way that you thought that they would. And so all of a sudden, I am working on a year's worth of confirmation bias that is so difficult to level out or unpack or change, right? And like you just said, it hurts bad when you make those assumptions. In this league that we're discussing, again, for the people listening, in this Olympians League, I remember vividly, you and I had 3 picks in a row in that rookie draft. Three picks in a row. And the 3 picks, I had the 2 before you, and then you had 1. And the 3 picks went Justin, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson. And I was really upset that I had to let one of those players go, because I needed the quarterback, and I knew that Riley, shout out to Mr. Bymaster, Riley was super hype on Justin Herbert. Said, you know what? I want to be in on this Herbert thing if it goes right. And then we had you and I and Riley and Foreman, I believe. We all had CeeDee Lamb 1, Justin Jefferson 2. Jefferson was our guy. And I didn't feel good about letting him fall to you, but I did. So I guess I say all that to say there's a lot of equity, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of research that went into all these players that we get. And it is incredibly difficult and hard to part with players that you feel like, this is my guy. And I don't even want to say but. My wife has really helped me with understanding that there is power in but. There's also power in and. So I've done all this work, and I have this team that I'm running that needs me to do my best by them, right? Or I need to do best by me with this team, and I can, if I want to, I can wallow in being right. I can revel in that. I can soak in it. I can put that robe on and strut around my league about 10 years if I want to about being right about CeeDee Lamb. The problem is if I do that, there's the cost benefit analysis, right, quote unquote, that says if I do that, I cannot, or excuse me, I may not be able to, when the time is right, cash in on all the work that I did. There's multiple ways that we can cash in on the work that we did. One of those ways is by drafting those players and putting them on our team and strutting around with that code. And another way of being right about what I said about that player is then leveraging that player to do something different or amazing with my team that helps my team be better. And it's something that we don't really discuss or unpack often, but that's a really, again, psych major here. That is a really intriguing piece for me that we don't tap into near as often to really get behind what's going on there.
It is. It's
You've gone robot.
Yeah, great.
Oh man.
Garbage. We got viewer and everything. We got the great Walido, and
I got your voice back, but I don't have your video back.
I mean,
your video's and went away again.
You're probably better off without the video.
No, gotta have it. That's my brother. Okay, I've got you back.
I still don't trust it. I've only got one bar.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, we can roll and self-evaluation, but deep self-evaluation, not just what do I do well and what do I do poorly, but even the things that you do well, you're able to leverage, to further your advantage. And it's, man, again, that's something I think a lot of people aren't thinking about. And by doing that, by getting deeper, this is the edge finders. The whole series, I think, is about finding the way different people approach this and succeed. And by coming at it from this psychological bent, but also from a trading bent, and also from a really honest self-evaluation, I think all three of those things really kind of propel you to be successful, because these are margins that other people aren't winning at. These are things that other people aren't thinking about in terms of accessing success. I think this may be my last question. We're rolling up on an hour. If I think of something else, I may throw something else at you. But did you start off in TA6 with the intention of drafting the entire first round of the 2021 rookie class, or was this kind of it fell into place later? Like, how did that come about?
Funny that you ask, Zach, and you talk about things coming full circle. Little podcast that I listened to when I wasn't affiliated with at the time was called the Dynasty Dummies. And one of the things that one of those, couple of nice guys, they love canned lobster, all sorts of stuff. The shout out to emeritus host Kyle LeBrecq, wherever he is right now, probably canning some lobster. And one of the things that was said was identifying a class and going hard after that class with whatever you got to do to ensure that you're in position in a draft class to capitalize on it. I had this wonderful team in TA6 in 2019, and with this team, I had star-studded receivers, you name them, I had them. Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, Steph Diggs, and it was awesome. And we got near to the end of the year, and I'm jockeying with a couple of people at the top of the standings, and I'm in second place going into the final week. What happens that final week? I lose to one of the last place teams in the league. Shout out to you, Adam Wilde. I'm still bitter about this. And with that loss, that dropped me out of the first round bye into the first round of those playoffs where I played another team and lost that week as a heavy favorite. You talk about sour and things not sitting well. I was not thrilled. So what did I do in that moment? I said, this is great. And I'm not tilting, you're tilting, right? So I'm going. I did a very not psychological thing at the time, and I said, I'm blowing it up. I'm moving my pieces. This is what's going to happen. And in the midst of thinking through and finally coming down off of being super upset about that loss and being a really, really sore loser about it, I then understood that I had enough equity on this team to target the class, which was 2 classes ahead, and understand that I could dominate an entire draft if I played it correctly. And over the course of the next, of about 10 months is how long it took for this to take place. But trades upon trades upon trades, losing them trades, because I wanted to make sure that I made something happen I didn't want to tell everyone about. I wanted it to be my little secret with my little crazy science experiment. And maybe at the end of it, when people start understanding what's happening, it'll be too late and I'll already be in position, right? And I was able to make the trades necessary, make a trade to eventually get a pick, and then make a trade to get a player that I know that I can do something else with. And that is how the J Mike Invitational was birthed. It was from the brain of one Zach Reed, even though he didn't know it. And I never told him until this very moment that it was really you that inspired me to take my sore loserness in that moment, take my sour grapes, take my moment where I wanted to take my ball and go home and turn it into something that, one, could be a ton of fun, but 2, sets my team up now after a couple drafts of having, I don't know how many first round picks. So it's 12 in this year. And I think I had 4 approximately from the year before. I've got 16 first round picks that are on my team, and they're all young players and people that, again, you talk about building a war chest, if you will, or again, the amoeba of assets. These are a lot of assets that are flexible and can grow and can become other things in the future. So that's how that was birthed. Man,
it's kind of flattering. And it's a low bar, but this may be the greatest thing that I have ever done for the fantasy community is set that spark off. And if you don't know what we're talking about, if you're listening to this show, get on Twitter, go to your search bar, type in JMic, JMIC, and then Invitational, and search. And the first tweet that is going to come up is going to be the initial pick, which, spoiler alert, is not who you think it is. And you know, watch the J Mike Invitational, because not only is it an amazing thing to witness somebody trading for an entire first round, but J Mike had so much fun with this draft this year, and with the J Mike Invitational, and with every pick, it was entertaining, it was fantastic, but also in the back of my mind, knowing that Dynasty Outhouse, that Rush Fisher was absolutely squirming because his ADP was going in the toilet, so to speak, was absolutely beautiful. So I didn't know that I was partially responsible for the spark that set this off, but now knowing that, like, I feel even better about it. That was great.
between you and Matt Renshaw, you all were the brainchild that helped put that all together. So yes, formally, since I have the opportunity now to obviously talk about this, thank you, because if it wasn't for you talking about all those years ago, attacking a class, pinpointing a class and saying, this is where I want to be and this is where I'm putting my chips. This is where I'm a terrible poker player, but pushing your chips all in and saying, this is what's up. This is where I'm at. It allows you, again, a focus of this is where I am. And it helps me understand, oh, nobody else is valuing these 2021 picks. And I'm looking around the league and everybody's willing to part with these. Okay, cool. It's 2 years out though. J Mike, like, what does it matter?
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll take it. Sweet. Bring him here.
and it's like you're in on a joke that nobody else gets. And it's so much fun because you know everybody's going to get there, because we're all driving on the same road. I mean, as much as we like to think that we have individual thoughts and we're doing, great work, analytically, or great film work, like, everybody's driving on the same road. We're all going to see the same players, and eventually we're all going to get to the same place. But if you're getting there a year ahead, and then the value just starts to balloon and rise. And I mean, even now, you're sitting there with, Najee Harris, who just came out and they gave him 7 carries in the opener in preseason, and people are already talking about him getting 300 touches. That is all of a sudden going to balloon. You start to see the Jamar Chase, make a move and shake the corner and catch the ball over the top in training camp, and people start talking about him. How many of those players are going to be in the top 24 or 25 next year or the year after? And you got them without necessarily spending that capital to acquire them. And so, to me, that is. And again, I'm biased because I build through drafts, and that's how I attack it. But to me, rebuilding like that, man, it's a reload. It's a okay, I'm going to find another clip, and that's where we're going. Instead of trying to find individual shells to reload your team, you got a clip, and here we come with 12.
We're listen. And we're of the same generation, Zach. We are children of Madden, and we are children of franchise mode, right? So,
yes.
But I mean, you talk about kids that would spend hours, what's weird is I am the weirdo that would take notes about trades that I made on Madden, and just like spend weekends doing, like, just wasting away time between football practice and everything else we were doing growing up, and building a team is something that, long before I knew what fantasy football was, is something that I deeply love. Like, love team building. Like, that's it. That's it right there.
Well, confession from me, I don't enjoy playing the game on Madden, but I have, I don't know, probably so I started playing Madden on Super Nintendo. So that was like the original, like the OG Madden, all the way to whatever the one that had Aaron Rodgers on it, because I don't have past like a PS2, so it was like the last PlayStation 2 Madden game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't play the games. I'll skip a season,
the sim,
and and just be the general manager, and I love to do the initial startup draft, and I love, like, it is so obvious now looking back. Yep. And looking where I am with fantasy football, that was the impetus for all of this is Madden. and again, like playing the game, like whatever. We used to play in college, and I would just get destroyed because I'm not great at it. I didn't love, but man, you let me build a team. Oh yeah.
I'm in. Sign me up.
Oh, I love it. J Mike, this has been an absolute blast tonight. And a little different. And I know, like, before the show, you kind of shrugged and said, "Nah, I've listened to the other couple of edge finders, and that's not me, but it is you." And I think that one of the earmarks of these edge finders and the people that I'll talk about and talk to, and I'm going to try to get maybe John Bosch to come on here in the next couple of weeks to see if he'll talk value, because he doesn't care about players. He cares about value. But I think the real earmark is you approach it in a way that nobody else does, or very few people do. And that is this edge in the Edge Finder series, is finding ways to win, because everybody plays in the middle. Everybody has the same information. It's about finding places on the edge, finding margins that you can win at, and absolutely the way you attack trades and the way that you plan and execute a rebuild is fantastic. And I appreciate you coming on and talking about it with me and letting me host, because I know that's tough. I know that, like, your instinct is to snatch that mic and ask me questions and to put somebody else first. But it's really nice to hear you.
Thank you for the opportunity. This was awkward and fun. It's like I'm home, but I'm not home. There's just so many pieces of this that were weird. But thank you for allowing me the ability as an internal processor. Sometimes even there were things that I was able to talk through this evening with you, like my counselor of sorts, that I don't know that I've ever really had given myself the opportunity, the time, the space to articulate a lot of these thoughts. So it's good to be able to take a lot of the stuff and craziness that happens in between my ears and be able to lay them out. And hopefully the folks who are listening, you're able to make some sort of sense of a lot of the nonsense that I was saying, and hopefully be someone who's willing to take chances with your rosters, take chances with the equity that you're putting into your teams, understand that you're going to be wrong sometimes, you're going to be right. And it's about continuing to work at it, because you're not going to be very good at it at first. But if you're willing to put in the reps, it's something that you are will most certainly see progress in. And whether that's something that other people will notice or whether it's simply something that you're going to be able to feel comfortable about, I can assure you that you will lean into your own processes and be way more comfortable with what you're choosing to do with your teams and how you're shooting your shots.
Yeah, exercise those fantasy football muscles until you're ready to flex them, and then flex on, baby. No, I'm. This was fantastic. I appreciate you coming on. Is there anything you want to play? I know that you're home, you're here. Open bar. Do we have an open bar coming up? I know that I am jonesing for an open bar.
Yeah, listen, we're back next week. So if you're listening to this the Tuesday after the expo, Gabe Gearing and I, he's on Twitter at FFManBun, my much better half in terms of the Open Bar podcast, another one of my brothers and one of the people that I'm super delighted to spend time with this weekend as well. But he and I are going to be trying something new with the Open Bar, and that is effective essentially immediately. Obviously, we're still hosting the podcast, but you'll have to tune in next week. And I would encourage you, if for whatever reason you have a computer, you have a mic, you have a webcam, and you've been jonesing to talk with boys at the Open Bar, I would encourage you around 9:30 p.m. Eastern-ish, keep your computer ready. Keep your mic ready. Because maybe, just maybe, there'll be an open invitation for anyone that would like to join us. I don't know. It's just what I heard on the street. It's just what I heard on Twitter street. The back room of the open bar where Zach tends to sleep in the bathtub and wait until the next time that he guests. It's just what I heard. That's really it.
The fridge back here is empty now. I'm glad you guys are coming back. Bring hot dogs and rolls because I'm out of food back here in the back room of the open bar.
We don't stock it as well in the summertime. We don't stock it as well. So the Open Bar Podcast, Dummy Blitz will be coming back as well as we get games and we get things to talk about. So I'm excited to see what we can do with that here on the network now, EFPN, and of course J Mike's Journal, which I plan on being more consistent with that as well and not dropping one every 3 months. Just being able to put my heart out there and share life experiences and hopefully help encourage folks and recognize that, man, we're all going through it. Like Russ said, we are all going through some stuff, right? We are all going through it, and understanding that it's not just you, that we all have our stuff and we're all learning as we grow and as we go. It's something to really embrace. That piece of the journey. So yeah, all of those places you'll find me. I'm not as engaging on Twitter as I once was, but I was good once as I ever was, as the old country song says, on Twitter at JMikeCheck. But again, it's always good to be with you, brother, and I appreciate the opportunity to share time with you. This is truly special for me. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you and everybody at work. I mean, you should be if you're following J Mike and you're following me and you're listening to the Dynasty Dummies, you ought to be following everybody at the DFPN at work. We got Sal, Kevin, and Steve with the Fantasy Football Funhouse occasionally, but also the Scott Fishbowl Podathon that they just rolled up and did. I mean, they could never record another Fantasy Football Funhouse, do the Podathon once a year, and absolutely have contributed just amazing things to the fantasy community. We got Matt Foreman, who's at Fat Mormon, FF Trader Joe, who, again, if you haven't seen it yet, there is a fantastic video of J Mike set to some mediocre music, but the J Mike video is fantastic. So at FF Trader Joe, he's great. Kyle is at K Lebrecht. And Russ at Dynasty Outhouse. We got it's an network. But it's a family, and that's the thing to me that has really kind of kept me grounded, kept me going in this space. Is it's a great group of people, and they're willing to reach out and talk to you about fantasy, but so much more. So again, give everybody at the network a follow. And I appreciate you riding with us tonight on the Dynasty Dummies. I am at Tacit Assassin 13. Thank you for listening. Peace.